The fluorescent lights of
Of
Blackstone
course,
facility
you have proven
flickered
yourself
like
worthy,
dying stars.
but the
Thayer
trials
Ashford
come
pressed his back
closer.
against cold concrete,
You
blood
are
seeping through the
mine
fingers
now.
clutched against his left shoulder. The metallic taste of fear coated his
You have
tongue.
entered our
Down
realm
the corridor,
uninvited.
boots hammered against
State your
steel flooring.
purpose or face
20
the
men,
consequences.
maybe more.
You have
All
been
armed,
chosen,
all trained
human.
to kill.
Your
His radio
destiny
crackled
lies
with
with us
static,
now.
then died. No connection to merit, no backup. Just him, a borrowed pistol with 4 rounds left, and the crushing weight of a mission gone catastrophically wrong. "Dad," he whispered into the darkness, his voice cracking, "if you're still in there, I need you." An explosion shook the eastern wing. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere in this concrete labyrinth, his father was alive. Somewhere in these halls, the man who'd haunted 15 years of unanswered questions was breathing the same recycled air. Thayer checked his weapon. 4 bullets, 20 guards. The math didn't work. It never did. He closed his eyes, and for just a moment, he was 20 years old again, standing in an empty house, holding a letter that explained nothing and promised less. Another explosion. Closer this time. The boots were getting louder. The C-47 transport rattled like a tin can full of bolts as Thayer brought her down through cloud cover over New Columbia. August heat shimmered off the tarmac in waves. The landing gear groaned as it extended, a sound that suggested prayer might be more useful than hydraulics. He'd bought the plane for $15,000 from a salvage yard in Montana. The seller had called it vintage. Thayer called it functional. Both were being generous. The wheel kissed concrete with a shriek of protest. Thayer cut the engines and sat for a moment in the sudden silence, watching fuel gauges that read lower than his bank account. 300 miles on fumes and luck. Not bad for a Tuesday. New Columbia sprawled beyond the runway, a city of glass towers and elevated transit lines, a place where ambition went to either flourish or die. Thayer had no ambitions left. He was just passing through. Fuel, supplies, maybe a cheap meal that didn't taste like regret. Then back to the sky, where nobody asked questions and nobody expected answers. He grabbed his jacket from the co-pilot seat, zipped it halfway. The August heat would make him regret the leather, but the jacket hid things, like the fact that he hadn't bought new clothes in 2 years, like the hollowness that had settled into his chest the way water fills a sinking ship. The market district hummed with the particular energy of commerce and desperation. Vendors hawked everything from reconditioned drone parts to synthetic protein that claimed to taste like beef. Nobody believed that lie anymore, but everybody kept buying it anyway. Thayer moved through the crowd with practiced anonymity. Head down, hands in pockets, the shuffle of a man who belonged nowhere and everywhere. He'd perfected this walk over 15 years of drifting. The trick was to look just dangerous enough that people didn't bother you, but just broken enough that they didn't fear you either. He found a parts dealer tucked between a noodle stand and a shop selling counterfeit military surplus. The dealer was maybe 60, with hands that shook and eyes that calculated. Behind him, shelves groaned under the weight of salvaged tech, most of it illegal, all of it overpriced. "Need a fuel regulator," Thayer said. "For a seat," the dealer snorted. "Those birds been dead 40 years. Mine missed the memo. Cost you $400. Thayer pulled 3 crumpled bills from his pocket. "I got $250. "Then you got a problem." They settled on $275 after 10 minutes of the kind of negotiation that felt more like mutual disgust. The regulator looked like it had been pulled from a crash site, but Thayer had learned to lower his standards along with his expectations. He was counting his remaining cash, $17 and change, when the crowd shifted. It started subtle. Conversations dipped in volume. The flow of bodies slowed, then stopped. Thayer glanced up from his empty wallet, instinct prickling at the base of his skull. 20 yards away, a convoy of black vehicles had materialized. 3 SUVs with government plates and windows so tinted they looked like holes punched into reality. Security personnel in tactical gear formed a perimeter, hands resting on holstered weapons, with the casual comfort of men who'd used them before. Thayer started to turn away. Government meant trouble, and trouble was the only thing he actively avoided. Then she stepped out of the middle vehicle. Governor Juliette Whitmore moved like water through stone, her presence carving space in the crowded market. She wore charcoal gray, professional but not cold, the uniform of someone who'd learned to carry authority without weaponizing it. Her hair was pulled back, revealing a face that belonged on currency or monuments. Early 40s probably, though stress had a way of lying about age. Thayer had seen her on news feeds. New Columbia's first female governor, elected 3 years ago on a platform of veteran support and prison reform. The kind of politician who either burned out fast or changed the world. The jury was still out. He tucked the fuel regulator into his jacket and turned to leave. Getting noticed by governors ranked somewhere between bad idea and catastrophically stupid on his list of things to avoid. But the crowd had become a wall. 200 people, all frozen, all watching. The security team scanned faces with professional paranoia. Thayer kept his head down, started to push through the press of bodies. Then the governor stopped walking. She stood 20 feet away, her gaze fixed on something. Not the crowd, not the market, something specific. Thayer's stomach dropped before his brain caught up to explain why. She was looking at his neck. The jacket collar had slipped. Just an inch. Just enough to expose the faded ink that had lived on his skin for 15 years. NB4721. Numbers he'd never understood. Numbers his father had never explained. Numbers that had apparently just stopped the governor of New Columbia dead in her tracks. Juliet Whitmore moved forward. Her security team protested with urgent whispers and positioning hands, clearly unhappy with whatever protocol she was shattering. She ignored them the way mountains ignore wind. Each step was measured, controlled, but her breathing was not. Thayer could see it now, the tension in her jaw, the way her hands trembled before she clasped them together. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough that he could smell clean fabric and something floral that didn't belong in a market that reeked of grease and humanity. Up close, she looked tired. Not old, tired in the way soldiers looked when wars ended, but memories didn't. She stared at the tattoo like it might vanish if she blinked. "I owe you my life," she said. The words fell into the sudden silence like stones into still water. 200 people held their breath. Thayer's heart hammered against his ribs. "I think you've got the wrong guy," he managed. His voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I've never met you." "Not you," she said, her eyes lifting to his face. "The man who bore that mark, he saved me 15 years ago." Thayer's mouth went dry. The tattoo suddenly burned against his skin, though that was impossible. Ink couldn't burn. Memory couldn't leave scars you could touch. Except it could. It absolutely could. "That man," he said carefully, "is dead." Something cracked in her expression. Not grief, something older and more complicated. "I know," she whispered. "I was there when he died." The market had become a photograph, a moment frozen in time. Thayer stood in the center of it, feeling the axis of his carefully constructed anonymity tilting into something he couldn't name and didn't want. "You need to come with me," Juliet said. It wasn't a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. Something in between. Something that suggested she knew he could refuse but hoped he wouldn't. "I was really hoping to finish shopping first," Thayer said, because humor was the only weapon he had left. For the first time, something softened in her features. Almost a smile. Almost relief. "He used to say things like that too," she said quietly, "when things got bad." Before Thayer could ask what she meant, the security team closed in. Not rough, but firm. Professional hands that suggested direction without demanding compliance. The crowd slowly exhaled, noise returning in cautious fragments. As he walked beside a governor who believed she owed him a life he hadn't saved, Thayer Ashford realized that stopping for supplies had once again proven to be a terrible idea. The transport glided above New Columbia's arterial highways, lifted by gravitic fields that hummed just beneath the threshold of human hearing. Through the transparent panels, the city unfolded like a circuit board, all clean lines and calculated intersections. No chaos here. Chaos had been regulated into submission decades ago. Thayer pressed his forehead against the cool glass, watching his reflection ghost over the cityscape below. Behind him, Governor Whitmore sat in silence. Her security team occupied the front compartment, giving them privacy that felt more like isolation. "You look like him," she said finally. Thayer turned. "That's concerning, considering I don't know who him is." Her eyes narrowed, not in anger but in focus. "You don't know?" "Lady, I know he left when I was 20. I know he took everything that mattered and left behind a tattoo and questions. Thayer touched his neck. This was supposed to mean something. He said it was important. He never said why. Juliet leaned forward, hands clasped between her knees. Your father was Dr. Garrett Ashford, military medic, served in the border wars until 2070. The name hit Thayer like a fist. 15 years of wondering, and here it was. Dr. Garrett Ashford. Not just dad. Not just the ghost in empty rooms. What happened to him? He was captured, Juliet said. August 2070. Detention Camp 7 near the Cascadia border. I was there too. Lieutenant Whitmore then, 23 years old and scared out of my mind. She stood, moved to the window, though Thayer suspected she wasn't really seeing the city. Camp 7 wasn't about rehabilitation. It was about breaking people. Some prisoners were military, some were political, some were just unlucky. Your father was there because he refused to follow orders he considered immoral. What kind of orders? The kind that required him to stop seeing prisoners as human beings. Silence stretched between them, heavy as stone. He saved me, Juliet continued. Not once, every day for 8 weeks. When I couldn't eat, he gave me his rations. When the interrogations got bad, he taught me breathing techniques. Box breathing, he called it. 4 counts in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. It sounds simple. It kept me sane. She turned back to Thayer. He talked about you constantly. His son, the kid who loved old airplanes and bad jokes. He said you were better than him. Smarter, kinder. He said leaving you was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Thayer's throat constricted. He had a funny way of showing it. He didn't choose to leave, Juliet said softly. They captured him on a medical supply run. By the time anyone realized what happened, it was too late. The transport began its descent toward the Capitol building, a structure that looked like someone had crystallized ambition into glass and steel. You said you were there when he died. Juliet nodded. August 28th, 2070. There was a riot. Someone had smuggled in a key card. Your father got 12 of us to the emergency exit. The guards realized what was happening. They ordered him to stop. He refused. Her voice went flat, the tone of someone reciting facts to avoid feeling them. They shot him 4 times, center mass. I saw him fall. I saw the blood. The other prisoners pulled me through the door before I could go back. By the time the authorities investigated, there was no body. They said he'd been disposed of with other casualties. Thayer turned away, staring at nothing. 15 years. 15 years of wondering if his father had abandoned him, chosen something else over family, walked away because staying was too hard. And all along, the man had been bleeding out in a prison corridor, buying time for strangers to escape. I'm sorry, Juliet said. I know sorry doesn't fix anything. Why did you bring me here? Thayer asked. To tell me my father's dead? I already knew that. I felt it. Because I owe him a debt I can never repay. And because you deserve to know he didn't leave you. He was taken from you. There's a difference, Aktizu. The transport settled onto a private landing pad. Through the windows, Thayer could see the governor's mansion rising like a promise or a threat. He couldn't tell which. There's something else, Juliet said. Something he left behind. For you. The mansion's interior matched the city, clean, efficient, designed by people who'd confused minimalism with meaning. Thayer followed Juliet through corridors that curved in ways his eyes didn't trust, past rooms that hummed with the quiet machinery of government. They stopped at a door that required 3 separate biometric scans. Inside was a room that felt more human than the rest of the building. Warm lighting, books on actual shelves, a desk made of real wood, scarred with use and time. Juliet opened a drawer, removed a small leather journal. The cover was worn soft, edges darkened by years of handling. She placed it on the desk between them like an offering. He hid this in his uniform. I found it after. I've kept it safe. I didn't think there was anyone to give it to. And then you walked into that market, wearing his mark. Thayer stared at the journal. It was maybe 6 inches by 4, bound with a leather cord. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. Everything that mattered. I can't, he said. You can, Juliet said. And you should. His hands shook as he reached for it. The leather was cool, smooth. He untied the cord. The pages inside were filled with handwriting he recognized from birthday cards and grocery lists, back when he'd been young enough to think his father would always be there. He opened to the first page. The date read June 15th, 2070. Below it, in his father's precise script, Thayer. If you're reading this, it means I did at least one thing right. It means someone got out. It means the sacrifice mattered. I don't regret being here. I don't regret the choices I made. Every life I save in this place is a gift I'm giving you. A world with more compassion, more mercy, more people who understand that strength isn't about power. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. I know you probably hate me right now. You have every right, but I need you to understand. I didn't abandon you. I was stolen from you. And every day I'm here, I fight to get back. Not for me, for you. Don't live like a ghost, son. Don't let this world make you hollow. Find something worth fighting for. Find someone worth protecting. And when you do, hold on with everything you have. The mark on your neck, NB4721. It's not just my prisoner number. It's a reminder. Every person is a number to someone, but every number is a person to God. Never forget that. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye. That Thayer read it 3 times, then a 4th. His vision blurred. He blinked hard, but the tears came anyway, hot and shameful and 15 years overdue. He'd spent a decade and a half believing his father had chosen duty over family, chosen strangers over his own son. And all along, Garrett Ashford had been fighting to survive, teaching people how to stay human in hell, writing letters to a son he believed he'd never see again. He talked about you every day, Juliet said softly, even at the end, especially at the end. The last thing he said, before it happened. He said, "Tell my son I wasn't brave. I was just trying to be the man he deserved." Thayer set the journal down carefully, as if it might shatter. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. "I'm not him," he said. "I'm not brave. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who flies cargo and drinks too much and can't keep a plane in the air without praying." "He would have liked you anyway," Juliet said. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Outside, New Columbia moved through its calculated routines. Inside, 2 people sat with the ghost of a man who'd saved one of them and fathered the other. Finally, Thayer spoke. "Why show me this now? Why not just let the past stay buried?" Juliet's expression shifted. Something harder entered her eyes. "Because the past isn't buried," she said, "and because I think your father's story isn't finished." The council chamber made Thayer feel like an insect under glass. Curved walls rose 30 feet, embedded with screens showing real-time data feeds from across the state. 15 council members sat in a semicircle, elevated, looking down at the floor where he stood. Governor Whitmore had brought him here directly from her office. No warning, no preparation, just a hand on his elbow and a quiet apology that things were about to get complicated. She hadn't been wrong. Senator Dalton Voss sat center position, and Thayer hated him on sight. 55, silver hair styled with military precision, eyes like chips of ice. He wore a suit that cost more than Thayer's plane and an expression that suggested he had learned to smile by studying instructional videos. "Mr. Ashford," Voss said. His voice carried the particular warmth of a tax audit. "Thank you for joining us. Didn't realize I had a choice." A few council members shifted. Voss's smile never wavered. "You appeared in our city 3 hours ago. Within 30 minutes, you were escorted to the governor's mansion. Within an hour, you were provided access to classified materials. I'm sure you understand our concern." "I understand you're worried I might be a Russian spy disguised as a down-on-his-luck pilot," Thayer said. "Seems like a lot of effort for someone barely worth the surveillance." "Your father was Dr. Garrett Ashford," Voss continued, ignoring the jab. "Military medic, died in 2070 during a prisoner uprising at Detention Camp 7. Is that correct?" The way Voss said it, so casual, so clinical, made Thayer's jaw tighten. "That's what I'm told. And now you've formed a relationship with Governor Whitmore, who was also incarcerated at that facility." "We met 4 hours ago," Thayer said. "If that qualifies as a relationship, my standards are lower than I thought." Juliet stepped forward. Senator, Mr. Ashford is here because I invited him. His father saved my life. I owed him the truth about what happened. How convenient, Voss said, that this truth emerges now, just as you face re-election, just as questions arise about your past incarceration. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Are you suggesting, Juliet said carefully, that I fabricated a relationship with a dead medic for political gain? I'm suggesting the timing is fortuitous. Thayer had spent 15 years avoiding conflict, running from confrontation, choosing flight over fight every single time. But something in Voss's tone, the casual dismissal of his father's sacrifice, flipped a switch he didn't know he had. My father died saving people, Thayer said. His voice came out flat, dangerous. Your problem isn't that the governor's using him. Your problem is that her story makes you look bad. Voss's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. You heard me. A military medic died protecting prisoners. That suggests the prisoners needed protecting. From someone. Wonder who that was? The room went silent. Every council member suddenly found their tablets fascinating. Voss stood slowly. Mr. Ashford, I recommend you be very careful with your next words. Or what? You'll have me arrested for asking uncomfortable questions? That'd be a bad look. Thayer, Juliet said quietly. A warning. But Thayer was done. Done running, done hiding, done letting people with power decide which truths mattered. My father was a good man, he said. Better than me, better than most. He died trying to save people society had written off. And you're sitting here in your expensive suit questioning whether that sacrifice was real. Whether it matters. Well, it mattered to the 12 people who got out alive. It mattered to the governor. It matters to me. He turned to Juliet. I'm done here. Mr. Ashford, Voss started. Senator, Thayer said. With all due respect, which is none, go to hell. He walked out. The doors sealed behind him with a soft hiss that sounded like disappointment. In the hallway, his hand started shaking again. Not fear, anger. The hot, useless kind that solved nothing and felt like victory anyway. Juliet caught up to him 30 seconds later. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I'm still deciding which. She studied him with something that might have been respect. Your father did things like that. Stood up when he should have sat down. Made noise when silence was safer. How'd that work out for him? He saved 12 lives, Juliet said, including mine. I'd say it worked out better than most people's silence. They stood in the corridor, two people trying to figure out what came next. Through the windows, New Columbia glittered like a promise, like hope packaged in glass and steel. Thayer's phone buzzed, unknown number. He almost ignored it, then remembered that ignoring things was how he'd spent 15 years accomplishing nothing. He opened the message. No words, just a photograph. Grainy, low resolution, clearly taken from a distance. It showed a man in medical scrubs, standing in what looked like an institutional hallway. Gray walls, fluorescent lighting. The man was older, maybe 60, with thinning gray hair and glasses. But it was the scar on his forehead that made Thayer's breath catch. A diagonal line, 2 inches long, cutting across his right eyebrow. He knew that scar. He'd given it to his father when he was 8 years old, threw a baseball inside the house despite being told not to. His father had gotten 15 stitches and never once gotten angry. Below the photo, a message appeared. Garrett Ashford didn't die. Blackstone Facility, Grid 447N, Nevada. Find Major Elise Merritt. Trust no one, especially not Voss. The phone buzzed again. A second photo, closer this time. The man's face, profile view. It was him. Older, worn, marked by years Thayer couldn't imagine, but unmistakably, impossibly him. His father was alive. Thayer looked up at Juliet. She was watching him, concern etched into her features. What is it? She asked. He handed her the phone. She stared at the screen for a long moment. The color drained from her face. That's impossible, she whispered. You saw him die. I saw him shot. I saw him fall. I never saw a body. They looked at each other, two people balanced on the knife's edge between hope and insanity. Blackstone Facility, Thayer said. Yeah, ever heard of it? No, but if your father's alive and someone's been hiding him for 15 years. She trailed off, the implications too large to name. Then I need to find him. Thayer, this could be a trap. Probably is, he agreed. But if there's even a chance, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. 15 years of grief. 15 years of unanswered questions. 15 years of believing his father had died a hero's death, quick and final and meaningful. And now the possibility that Garrett Ashford had spent those years alive, imprisoned, waiting for a rescue that never came. Thayer touched the tattoo on his neck. NB4721. Not just a number, a reminder, a promise. I'm going to Nevada, he said. Juliet nodded slowly. Then I'm helping, whatever it takes. Above them, the mansion's security systems hummed their constant vigilance. Below them, New Columbia moved through its evening routines, unaware that two people had just decided to challenge the carefully constructed reality they lived in. In his office across the city, Senator Dalton Voss ended a call and smiled. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The boy had taken the bait. Now they just had to wait for him to arrive at the trap. The shooting range sat 20 miles outside New Columbia's gleaming core, where the city's carefully maintained facade gave way to industrial honesty. Concrete bunkers, rusted chain link, and the smell of gun oil and old coffee. This was where people came when they needed to shoot something and didn't want questions. Thayer had spent the night reading his father's journal, cover to cover, then reading it again. Dawn found him exhausted, caffeinated, and certain of two things. His father was alive, and he had no idea how to save him. The address from the mysterious text had led him here. The cryptic instruction, find Major Elise Merritt. He pushed through the range's entrance. Inside, the crack of gunfire echoed like irregular heartbeats. A dozen lanes, most empty. At the far end, a solitary figure in tactical pants and a faded army shirt stood with the stillness of someone for whom shooting had become meditation. She fired 3 rounds. Center mass, tight grouping. The kind of accuracy that came from muscle memory older than thought. Thayer waited until she'd cleared her weapon. Major Merritt? She turned. 45, maybe. Lean in the way of people who'd learned to survive on less than enough. Short, dark hair graying at the temples. A scar ran from her left eyebrow to her cheekbone, faded white against tan skin. But it was her eyes that held him. Dark, measuring, carrying the particular weight of someone who'd seen things they couldn't unsee. Haven't been called Major in 15 years, she said. Her voice was rough, like gravel being sorted. Who's asking? Thayer Ashford. The gun in her hand didn't quite point at him. Didn't quite point away either. Garrett's son. That's what they tell me. She studied him with an intensity that felt surgical. You have his eyes. He'd hate that I noticed. You knew him. Detention Camp 7, August 2070. She set the gun down carefully, turned to face him fully. Doc Ashford kept me alive through 2 broken ribs and a punctured lung. Smuggled antibiotics from the guard's medical supplies. Could have been shot for it. That sounds like him, Thayer said quietly. I heard he died in the riot. So did I, until yesterday. Until... Merritt's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or confirmation of a suspicion she'd carried for 15 years. You got proof? Thayer pulled out his phone, showed her the photographs. Merritt stared at them for a long moment, her jaw working like she was chewing on words too dangerous to swallow. Blackstone, she said finally. You know it? Know of it. Black Site Detention Facility. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's where they put prisoners who know too much to release and did too little to execute. She handed the phone back. If Doc's there, he's been there since 2070. 15 years. 15 years in a prison that didn't officially exist. Thayer's chest tightened. I need to get him out. You need a team, a plan, and a miracle, Merritt corrected. Blackstone isn't some county jail, it's a fortress. You have a better idea? Merritt walked to a locker, retrieved a tablet. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency. After Doc saved me, I made it my business to learn things. Track people, build networks. You don't survive Camp 7 without becoming paranoid. She pulled up a file. There are 5 other people Doc saved that night. I've kept tabs on all of them. Some military, some civilian. All of them owe their lives to a man who died, or didn't die, saving them. The screen showed 6 faces, names, and locations. We could gather them, Merritt said. Call in a debt 15 years old. But you need to understand something, Ashford. If we go after Blackstone, we're declaring war on people with resources we can't match. I don't care. You should, because they'll come after everyone you know, everyone you love. They'll burn your life down and salt the earth. Thayer thought about his empty apartment in Montana, the storage unit containing everything he owned, the phone that rarely rang, a life so small it could be packed into a duffel bag. They're welcome to try, he said. Merritt smiled. It was the kind of smile that suggested she'd been hoping he'd say that. Doc always said you were tougher than you looked. She extended her hand. Let's go get him. The safe house was a converted warehouse in the industrial district, the kind of building city planners pretended didn't exist. Steel doors, reinforced windows, and security cameras that actually worked. Inside, Merritt had transformed the space into something between a barracks and a command center. Sleeping quarters in one corner, weapons locker in another, a long table covered in maps, tablets, and the particular clutter of people planning something inadvisable. Over the next 6 hours, 4 people arrived. Lieutenant Hayes came first. 52, built like a barrel, with engineer's hands and a face that suggested he'd stopped finding things funny sometime in 2070. He walked with a slight limp, legacy of a shattered ankle that Garrett had set with nothing but gauze and prayer. I design water purification systems now, he said, shaking Thayer's hand with a grip that could crush walnuts. Boring work, keeps me sane, but I told myself if anyone ever needed help for Doc's sake, I'd drop everything. Corporal Daniels arrived an hour later, 41 compact, with the graceful economy of movement that marked former special operations. She taught hand-to-hand combat at a private security firm and looked at Thayer the way a chess player studies an opponent's opening move. Your father taught me that fear was just information, she said. Use it or let it use you. Changed my life. Sergeant Lowell was next, 48, quiet, with eyes that tracked everything and revealed nothing. He worked as a hunting guide in the mountains and carried a custom rifle that had probably cost more than Thayer's plane. I don't talk much, he said. Doc understood that, never pushed, just sat with me when things got bad. I owe him quiet company and one suicide I didn't commit. The last to arrive was Private Quinn, 36, wiry, with nervous energy and hands that never stopped moving. He'd found work as a demolitions contractor, bringing down old buildings to make room for new ones. Doc pulled me back from the edge, Quinn said. Literally, I was going to hang myself with a bedsheet. He cut me down, sat with me for 3 days straight. Didn't say much, just stayed. He looked at Thayer. You got his face, but not his stillness. Working on it, Thayer said. They gathered around the table. Merritt pulled up satellite imagery of Nevada's Grid 447N. The screen showed desert, scrubland, and nothing else for 60 miles in any direction. Blackstone is here, she said, highlighting a cluster of buildings disguised to look like a geological research station. Officially, it's studying subsurface water deposits. Unofficially, it houses 47 prisoners and a security detail of approximately 80 personnel. 80 against 6, Hayes said. I faced worse odds. Not much worse, but worse. We can't assault it directly, Daniel said. We'd be dead before we reach the perimeter. So we don't assault it, Merritt replied. We infiltrate. She zoomed in on the facility's eastern section. Hayes, can you identify vulnerabilities? Hayes studied the image, his engineer's brain cataloging structure and weakness. Ventilation system. See these exhaust ports? Standard industrial design, probably 24 inches in diameter. Big enough for a person. Barely. How do we get past security, Quinn asked. Create a diversion, Merritt said. Something loud on the east side pulls personnel away from the west side. Thayer and Daniels go in through the ventilation system. Locate prisoners. Get them out. What about external response? Lowell asked. Military base 40 miles south. They could be airborne in 15 minutes. Merritt smiled grimly. That's where Governor Whitmore comes in. Thayer had called Juliet before coming to the safe house. She'd listened without interruption, then said 3 words. I'm making calls. Now her face appeared on Merritt's tablet screen, transmitted through encrypted channels that Hayes had assured them were probably secure. I've reached out to the FBI, Juliet said, formally requested an investigation into Blackstone. They've refused, said the facility doesn't exist in any database. Which confirms it's real, Merritt said. I've also been receiving pressure to drop this. Senator Voss called me directly, suggested my political future depended on letting the past stay buried. Thayer's jaw tightened. He's involved. More than involved, Juliet said. I had my staff do some digging. Dalton Voss was director of Western Detention Operations in 2070. Camp 7 fell under his jurisdiction. The room went silent. He ran the camp, Hayes said slowly, which means he knows what happened there. It means more than that, Juliet continued. I found budget allocations for something called Project Chimera, classified, but the funding originated from Voss's office, $80 million over 5 years. What was Project Chimera, Daniels asked. I don't know, but I think your father did, Thayer. I think that's why they can't let him go. Thayer's mind raced. His father's journal had mentioned experiments, medical procedures done without consent, prisoners who disappeared into isolation and never came back. He was documenting it, Thayer said. The experiments, the deaths, he was collecting evidence. And when the riot happened, Merritt added, they couldn't kill him publicly, too many witnesses, so they faked his death and moved him somewhere no one would look. 15 years, Quinn said quietly. 15 years keeping him alive because he knows their secrets. Juliet's expression hardened. I'm going to Nevada. I'll set up a command post outside the facility's perimeter. If you get the prisoners out, I'll live stream everything. Make it too public to suppress. Governor, they'll destroy your career, Thayer said. I don't care. Your father gave me my life back. Time I return the favor. They spent the next 8 hours planning. Hayes drew schematics. Daniels choreographed movements. Lowell calculated sight lines and firing positions. Quinn assembled a demolition package that would make noise without making corpses, in his words. Thayer mostly listened. He'd never planned a military operation. He'd never shot anyone. He'd spent his adult life avoiding exactly this kind of situation. But as the plan took shape, something shifted inside him. Not confidence, not courage, something simpler and more fundamental. Purpose. For 15 years, he'd drifted. No direction, no goal beyond tomorrow's fuel payment. He'd convinced himself that small ambitions meant small disappointments. But his father hadn't lived small. Garrett Ashford had chosen to stand in hell and hold the door open for others to escape. Had chosen mercy when cruelty was easier. Had chosen to die or not die protecting strangers. The least his son could do was choose to fight. Night found Thayer alone on the warehouse roof, staring at stars mostly hidden by light pollution. Below, the city hummed with life. People sleeping, working, loving, dying, all of them unaware that 6 people were planning to assault a facility that didn't exist to save a man the world thought was dead. Footsteps behind him. Merritt climbed through the access hatch, moved to stand beside him. For a while, they shared the silence. You afraid? She asked finally. Terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. My father wasn't afraid. Yes, he was, Merritt said. Doc was afraid all the time. He just didn't let it stop him. She paused. He talked about you constantly. Drove some people crazy, but it helped. Reminded us we had lives waiting outside those walls. What did he say? That you were the best thing he'd ever done. That if he died, at least he'd lived long enough to teach you to throw a baseball. That someday you'd be braver than him. Thayer's throat tightened. I'm not. You're here, aren't you? Planning to walk into a black site prison? That's not bravery. It's stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing, Merritt said. Doc taught me that too. She turned to leave, then stopped. He loved you, Ashford. More than breath. More than freedom. When they beat him, he'd go somewhere in his head. Said he was remembering teaching you to fly kites. Said the memory made him untouchable. She descended through the hatch, leaving Thayer alone with the stars and the weight of a love he'd doubted for 15 years. He pulled out his father's journal, opened to a random page. The entry was dated November 2070, 3 months after the supposed death. Day 93 in this new hell. They moved us after the Camp 7 incident, somewhere in Nevada. No names anymore, just numbers. They call me Asset 4721, as if 15 years of medical practice and a son who needs me can be reduced to 4 digits. But I refuse to let them make me forget. Every morning I say Thayer's name out loud. The guards think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But crazy is better than empty. They want information about what I saw. The experiments, the deaths. They're offering release if I sign their non-disclosure. But signing means forgetting, means pretending those deaths didn't matter. I can't do that, won't do that. So I'll stay, and I'll remember, and I'll hope that someday someone comes asking the right questions. Thayer, if you ever read this, I'm not a martyr. I'm just a father who chose to be the kind of man his son could be proud of, even if that son never knows, especially if that son never knows. Thayer closed the journal carefully. His hands were steady now, his mind was clear. Tomorrow they would drive to Nevada. Tomorrow they would infiltrate a facility that didn't exist. Tomorrow they would risk everything for a man the world had forgotten. But tonight Thayer Ashford sat under polluted stars and felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. He felt like his father's son. The assault plan was scheduled for 8 p.m. the following night, which left one full day for preparation, equipment checks, and the particular anxiety that comes from knowing you're about to do something monumentally dangerous. Thayer spent the morning at the range with Merritt. She'd insisted. "You don't need to be a marksman," she'd said. "You just need to not shoot yourself or me." He'd managed both, though barely. The Glock felt heavy and wrong in his hands, like holding someone else's responsibility. But Merritt was patient, correcting his grip, his stance, his breathing. "You flinch before you fire," she observed after his 10th magazine, anticipating recoil. "I don't like guns. Nobody who's sane likes guns. We just recognize they're sometimes necessary." She demonstrated the proper stance. "Your father hated them too, carried one for 3 years and never fired it. Said his job was saving lives, not taking them. Did he ever have to?" Once, Camp 7, guard was about to execute a prisoner. Doc shot him in the leg, non-lethal, then treated the wound. Merritt's expression softened with memory. Guard was so confused he forgot to be angry. By noon, Thayer could hit a man-sized target at 20 yards. Not well, but consistently. Merritt declared it adequate for not dying immediately. The afternoon was spent reviewing the plan. Hayes had acquired vehicles, 2 SUVs with government plates that asked no questions. Quinn had assembled his diversion package, a collection of explosives designed to sound apocalyptic without actually killing anyone. "Lot of flash powder," Quinn explained, handling the components with the casual comfort of someone who'd made friends with things that explode. "Some magnesium for bright burning. Time charges. Should create enough chaos for a 5-minute window." "And if it doesn't?" Thayer asked. Quinn smiled. "Then we improvise poorly and die quick." Comforting. At 3 p.m., Juliet called. Her face on the screen looked drawn, tired in the way of people fighting battles on multiple fronts. "Voss knows," she said without preamble. "I don't know how, but he knows you're planning something. He's tripled security at the Capitol. My staff is being monitored. My phones are probably tapped." "Can you still get to Nevada?" Merritt asked. "I'm leaving in an hour, private or transport. I've told my security detail it's a personal matter. They'll follow, but at least they're loyal to me, not Voss." "What about the FBI?" Thayer asked. Juliet's expression hardened. "They have opened an investigation into me, questioning my fitness for office, suggesting my past trauma has compromised my judgment." "Voss. Obviously, he's trying to discredit me before we can expose Blackstone. If I'm declared mentally unfit, anything I reveal becomes suspect." Thayer felt rage building in his chest, cold and controlled, the kind of anger that didn't burn hot but froze solid. "We're going tonight," he said. "No delays. If Voss is moving against you, it means he's worried. People who aren't guilty don't preemptively attack." "Be careful," Juliet said. "Whatever's at Blackstone, it's worth killing to protect. That means it's worth dying to defend." "Understood." "And Thayer," she paused, "bring your father home." The screen went dark. At 5 p.m., they loaded the vehicles. Weapons, medical supplies. Quinn's explosives, Hayes's technical equipment. Daniels did a final gear check with military precision, ensuring every buckle, strap, and magazine was exactly where it needed to be. "We move in silence unless I give the word," she instructed. "Hand signals only. If someone goes down, we adapt. No heroics. We're extracting prisoners, not winning medals." They piled into the SUVs. Thayer rode with Merritt and Hayes. Quinn, Daniels, and Lowell took the second vehicle. The sun was setting as they left New Columbia, bleeding red across the horizon like an open wound. The drive took 4 hours. 4 hours of highway and desert, civilization giving way to emptiness. They stopped once at a rest area 90 miles from the target to review final positions and synchronize watches. "Last chance to back out," Merritt said, looking at each of them in turn. Nobody moved. "Then let's go save our medic." They approached Blackstone from the west, lights off, using GPS and terrain features for navigation. The facility appeared as a cluster of low buildings surrounded by chain-link fence. Floodlights illuminated the perimeter. Guard towers at each corner. Everything designed to look like a research station and function like a prison. Thayer's heart hammered. His mouth was dry. His hands wanted to shake, but he forced them still. Merritt parked half a mile out in a depression that hid them from direct sight. Lowell immediately moved to an elevated position, his rifle scope sweeping the facility. 12 guards visible, he reported. Rotating patrol pattern. 30-second intervals. "Hayes, how long to reach the ventilation intake?" Merritt asked. Hayes studied the terrain through binoculars. 8 minutes, assuming no patrol encounters. "Quinn, ready?" Quinn checked his detonator. "Just say when." Merritt looked at Thayer. "You good?" He wasn't. His stomach churned. His mind screamed that this was insane, impossible, suicidal. But his father was inside those walls. His father who'd spent 15 years in hell because he'd chosen mercy over obedience. "I'm good," Thayer lied. "Then let's move. Quinn, you're up in 10 minutes. Thayer, Daniels, with me." They crept through scrubland toward the facility's western edge. The night was cold, desert air stealing heat. Thayer controlled his breathing, using the technique from his father's journal. It helped. They reached the base of the fence. Hayes had been right. The ventilation intake was here, 24 inches of corrugated metal disappearing into concrete. Big enough for a person. Barely. Daniels cut the fence with wire cutters that whispered through chain link. They slipped through the gap. Then they waited. 8 minutes felt like hours. Thayer crouched in shadow, watching guards patrol, watching lights sweep predictable patterns. Professional security done by people who'd grown complacent because nothing ever happened. Tonight would be different. His radio crackled once. Quinn's signal. 10 seconds later, the eastern side of the facility erupted in light and sound. Explosions that weren't quite explosions. Flash powder igniting in sequence, bright as dying stars. Magnesium burning white hot. Enough noise to wake the dead and pull every guard toward the source. Chaos. Beautiful, tactical chaos. "Go," Merritt hissed. Thayer squeezed into the ventilation shaft. Metal pressed against his shoulders, his hips. No room to turn around. Only forward. Only deeper into a facility that officially didn't exist. To find a father the world thought was dead. Behind him, Daniels followed. Ahead, darkness and the sound of his own breathing. Thayer Ashford crawled into hell and hoped he'd find his father before hell found him. The ventilation shaft was a coffin of corrugated steel. 24 inches of space that shrunk with every breath. Thayer pushed forward on his elbows, dragging himself through darkness that pressed like water. Behind him, Daniels moved with the silent efficiency of someone who'd done this before, in places worse than this. Metal groaned under their weight. Thayer froze, heart slamming against ribs. Outside, explosions continued their symphony of distraction. Voices shouted. Boots hammered concrete. The entire eastern perimeter was reacting exactly as planned, which meant the western interior was as undefended as it would ever be. "Keep moving," Daniels whispered. Her voice carried no fear, only focus. They crawled for what felt like miles, but measured closer to 90 feet. The shaft branched, left toward administration, right toward detention. Hayes had marked it on the schematics in red ink. Thayer went right. The shaft ended at a vent cover. Through the metal grating, he could see a corridor, fluorescent lights, concrete walls. No guards visible. He worked the screws loose with the multi-tool Merritt had given him, hands slick with sweat despite the cold. The vent came free. Thayer dropped 7 feet to linoleum floor, knees absorbing impact. Daniels landed beside him, already moving, weapon up in a two-handed grip. They were inside. The detention wing smelled of disinfectant and something older. Despair, maybe, or just the accumulated weight of years spent in rooms without windows. Doors lined both sides of the corridor, each marked with a number stenciled in black paint. No names, just numbers. Thayer moved down the hall, checking each door's small observation window. Empty cells, or cells containing men who looked at him without hope, as if visitors were hallucinations to be ignored. Cell 23, cell 24, cell 25. Then he saw him. The man sat on a narrow cot, reading a book so worn the cover had lost all color. Gray hair thinned across a skull that had always been prominent, but now suggested starvation. The face was older, carved with lines that spoke of pain measured in years. But the eyes behind wireframe glasses, those were the same. Thayer's vision blurred, his throat closed. 15 years of grief and anger and unanswered questions crystallized into a single moment of perfect clarity. His father was alive. He fumbled with the door's electronic lock. His hands shook now, all the steadiness he'd manufactured collapsing into desperate motion. The lock blinked red, denied. Red again. Thayer, Daniels touched his shoulder. Breathe, you know how to do this. Hayes had taught him, bypass sequence. 3 numbers. Muscle memory kicked in where conscious thought failed. The lock blinked green. The door opened with a hydraulic hiss. Garrett Ashford looked up from his book. For 3 heartbeats, neither man moved. The book slipped from Garrett's hands, hit the floor with a sound like thunder. Thayer? The word came out broken, disbelieving. You're not real. I'm real, Dad. Thayer crossed the cell in 2 steps. Up close, his father looked ancient and ageless simultaneously. 62 years worn hard. But alive. Impossibly, miraculously alive. You can't be here. This place, they'll kill you. Then they'll have to catch me first. Thayer grabbed his father's arm. The bones felt like bird wings under thin fabric. We're leaving. Now. The others, Garrett gestured weakly toward the corridor. 46 others. We can't. We're getting everyone out, Daniel said. She was already moving down the hall, checking doors, memorizing faces. How many can walk? Most of them. Some need help. Garrett stood, swayed. Thayer caught him. I need my medical bag. Cell 12, they let me keep basic supplies. Thayer ran. Cell 12's door was unlocked. Inside, a bag that had seen better decades sat on a shelf. He grabbed it, sprinted back. Garrett had regained some steadiness. Prison doctors learned to function through weakness. He moved to the nearest occupied cell. This is Foster. He has diabetes. He'll need help. Daniels was opening doors. Men emerged like ghosts, uncertain if rescue was real or just another cruelty disguised as hope. Some were old, some were young. All carried the particular exhaustion of people who'd survived by forgetting what living felt like. We have 5 minutes, Daniel said, maybe less. Thayer, get your father and these men to the western fence. I'll cover the rear. An alarm shrieked. Red lights pulsed like a hemorrhaging heart. They know we're inside, Daniel said calmly. Time to move. They ran, 47 prisoners and 2 rescuers, moving through corridors that suddenly filled with sound. Boots, shouts, the distinctive clatter of weapons being readied. They rounded a corner. 6 guards blocked the hallway, weapons raised. Down! Daniels fired 3 controlled bursts, suppressing fire, not kill shots. The guards scattered. Return fire chewed into walls, spitting concrete dust. Thayer pushed his father and the others back, around another corner. They were trapped. Western exit behind them. Guards ahead. More guards coming from the east, called back from Quinn's diversion. This was the part of the plan where everything fell apart. Garrett grabbed Thayer's arm with surprising strength. The medical wing, through there. He pointed to a side door. Emergency exit to the loading dock. They use it for body disposal. Cheerful, Thayer muttered. But he moved. They all moved. 47 desperate people flowing like water toward any opening that promised air and sky. The medical wing was a nightmare rendered in stainless steel. examination tables with restraints, shelves of pharmaceuticals, equipment designed for purposes Thayer didn't want to imagine. His father's face went hard as they passed through. Project Chimera, Garrett said quietly. They tested bioweapons here, on prisoners. 43 dead over 5 years. I documented everything. Where? Thayer asked. My memory, the only place they couldn't search. The emergency exit opened onto a loading dock. Beyond it, darkness and desert. Freedom measured in yards. They spilled out into night air that tasted like salvation. 47 men who'd forgotten what stars looked like, suddenly reacquainted with infinity. But freedom was measured in more than distance. Warden Brooks stood between them and the fence, flanked by 10 guards. All armed, all aiming. Brooks was maybe 50, with a face that suggested he'd learned cruelty before kindness and liked the first lesson better. His uniform was pristine despite the chaos. His expression carried the particular satisfaction of people who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Dr. Ashford, Brooks said, or should I say Asset 4721, leaving without saying goodbye. Garrett stepped forward, placing himself between Brooks and his son. The same motion he'd made 15 years ago. The same motion that had earned him 4 bullets and a faked death. Let them go, Garrett said. You want me. I'm the one with the memories. The rest are just numbers. Everyone's just a number, Brooks replied. That's what makes this work. Thayer's hand found his weapon. His father's hand found his wrist, stopping him. No, Garrett said quietly. I didn't survive 15 years so you could die, proving you're brave. Doc always was soft, Brooks said. Even after everything we did, still trying to save people. He raised his weapon. Senator Voss sends his regards. The shot came from 300 yards away. A whisper of displaced air, then Brooks's right hand exploded, weapon and flesh becoming shrapnel. He screamed, clutching a hand that was mostly gone. Lowell's voice crackled over the radio. Target neutralized. Move now. Chaos. The guards scattered, uncertain whether to help Brooks or maintain position. Daniels used the confusion, firing control bursts that drove them to cover without killing. Fence, she shouted. Go! They ran. 47 prisoners, finding reserves they'd thought long depleted. Thayer half-carried his father, who weighed nothing, who'd burned himself down to essential elements over 15 years of controlled starvation. Behind them, more guards poured from the facility. Ahead, the fence yawned like an open mouth. Merritt had cut a gap large enough for traffic. They poured through. Brooks, one-handed and insane with pain, appeared from nowhere. He'd circled somehow, moved with the desperate speed of men who knew failure meant prison or worse. His left hand held a pistol. He aimed at Garrett. Time crystallized. Thayer saw it happening in the particular slow motion of moments that can't be undone. His father, exhausted and defenseless. Brooks, finger tightening on a trigger. The mathematics of violence solving itself in the only way violence knows. Thayer moved, not thinking, just moving. He stepped between gun and father. The bullet hit his left shoulder, the same shoulder that had been grazed during the safe house ambush 2 days ago. The universe apparently had a sense of humor. He went down. The desert rushed up to catch him, but Merritt was there. Her weapon spoke once. Brooks crumpled like abandoned clothing. Thayer, Garrett's voice cracking, hands that new trauma assessment moving across his son's body. Stay with me. Stay with me. I'm okay, Thayer gasped. He wasn't. His shoulder felt like molten lead, but he was alive, and his father was alive, and sometimes that was enough. Merritt and Daniels dragged them both toward the SUVs. Behind them, the facility's lights blazed like a beacon calling for reinforcement. They had minutes before military response arrived. They piled into vehicles. Lowell appeared from his position, moving with the unhurried speed of professionals who knew panic was a luxury. Quinn was already behind the wheel of the lead SUV, engine running. Hospital? Quinn asked. No, Garrett said. He was pressing gauze against Thayer's wound with the efficiency of someone who'd treated trauma in conditions much worse. They'll be watching hospitals. Get out to the rendezvous point. I can stabilize him. They drove into darkness. Behind them, Blackstone facility grew smaller, its secrets finally breached, its prisoners finally free. Thayer's vision swam, blood loss and shock turning the world soft at the edges. But his father's hands were steady, and his father's voice was talking him through it, and somehow that was enough to hold on to. Box breathing, Garrett said. Remember? 4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, 4 hold. Thayer breathed. His father breathed with him. 15 years apart, and they fell into synchronization as if time had never separated them. I'm sorry, Garrett said quietly, for leaving, for all of it. You didn't leave, Thayer managed. They took you. There's a difference. I should have fought harder to get back. You saved 46 people, Dad. That's fighting pretty hard. Garrett's eyes glistened. 15 years of holding it together and his son's forgiveness finally broke something loose. You came for me, he whispered. After everything, you came. Every number is a person, Thayer said, touching his tattoo. You taught me that. They drove through desert night toward the rendezvous point where Juliet waited with cameras, in truth. Behind them, a facility that officially didn't exist started to burn. Quinn had left a parting gift, timed incendiary charges that would erase evidence but give personnel time to evacuate. The explosion lit the horizon like a second dawn. 2 days after the rescue, Thayer woke in a private clinic outside Las Vegas. His shoulder was bandaged, drugged, and objecting strenuously to existence. Garrett sat beside the bed, looking only slightly more alive than his son felt. Hey, Thayer croaked. Hey yourself. Garrett offered water. How's the pain? Educational. That's one word for it. Garrett set the cup down. You're going to be fine. Bullet went through clean, missed everything vital. You'll have a scar to match mine. Thayer touched his forehead where his father's scar lived. Matching set. Something to remember each other by. They sat in comfortable silence, 15 years of separation, and they fell into it like remembering how to breathe. Juliet live-streamed everything, Garrett said finally. The escape, the prisoners, the facility burning. It's gone viral, 40 million views and counting. Voss? FBI arrested him 6 hours ago. Juliet testified before Congress. Showed documentation of Project Chimera. 127 prisoners used for biological weapons testing. 89 dead. The rest, he gestured at himself. The rest got to live with the memories. What happens now? Congressional investigation, federal charges. Voss is looking at life in prison, assuming he lives long enough to stand trial. 14 of his associates are already cooperating. Thayer closed his eyes. Justice didn't erase 15 years, didn't unwrite the torture or the dead, but it was something, a marker that said these things mattered, these people mattered. And the others, he asked, the 46? Free, medical treatment, federal compensation, which doesn't come close to enough, but it's something. Most of them want to testify. Garrett paused. Merritt's organizing them. She's good at that. She's good at most things. She said you were terrible at shooting, but decent at not dying. High praise from her. Thayer smiled despite the pain. Where will you go after this? Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Columbia University offered me a position, teaching medical ethics. Seems appropriate, given everything. He looked at his son. What about you? I don't know. I've been drifting for 15 years. Guess I should figure out what anchored feels like. You could come to New Columbia. Juliet's starting a foundation. Prison reform, veteran support. She wants to call it the Ashford Initiative. That's presumptuous. I thought so too. But she insisted. Said your name carried weight now. Said people needed to remember that one person can make a difference. Thayer thought about his empty life in Montana, the storage unit containing everything he owned, the phone that never rang. He thought about his father, alive and teaching students how to heal rather than harm. He thought about Merritt and the others, building something from the ashes of Blackstone. Okay, he said, I'll stay. Garrett's smile was the same smile from 15 years ago, before capture, before torture, before everything. Relief and joy and love that had survived hell by refusing to become bitter. Good, he said. I've got 15 years of bad jokes to make up for. 6 months later, Thayer stood before 200 veterans at Arlington National Cemetery. The morning was cold, the kind of cold that seeps through dress uniforms and pretends to be gravity. Governor Juliet Whitmore had just finished speaking. Senator Voss's conviction, life without parole, had been announced the previous week. 14 co-conspirators had received sentences ranging from 10 to 40 years. Project Chimera was being dismantled, its records made public, its victims finally acknowledged. Now it was Thayer's turn. He touched the dog tag around his neck. Not his father's. NB4721, Garrett Ashford, U.S. Army Medical Corps. His father had given it to him a month ago in a small ceremony that had made both men cry and neither man ashamed. My father taught me that mercy isn't weakness, Thayer began. His voice carried across the assembled crowd, amplified by speakers and by the particular acoustics of people listening. He taught me that every person, regardless of what they've done or where they've been, deserves to be seen. Not as a number, not as a problem, as a human being. He looked out at the faces, veterans who'd served and survived, families who'd lost people to wars visible and invisible, the 46 prisoners from Blackstone, now free, now rebuilding lives from ruins. For 15 years, I thought my father abandoned me, chose duty over family. I was wrong. He didn't choose duty, he chose compassion. And compassion kept him alive when nothing else could. Behind him, Garrett sat beside Juliet. They'd become friends during the testimony, two people bound by trauma and survival. She'd won re-election with 73% of the vote. The Ashford Reform Act had passed Congress with bipartisan support. 6 black site facilities had been closed. 1,700 prisoners had been released and after review showed their detentions violated both law and conscience. The Ashford Foundation exists to honor a simple idea, Thayer continued, that mercy is power, that kindness is strength, that one person, standing up when everyone else sits down, can change the world. He paused, letting the words settle like snow. My father didn't save 46 people because he was special. He saved them because he refused to be ordinary. Because when the universe presented him with a choice, protect yourself or protect others, he chose others. Every time, without hesitation. His voice cracked. He didn't try to hide it. I'm not my father. I don't have his courage. I don't have his selflessness. But I learned from him, and now I want to pass that learning forward. He gestured to the assembled veterans. Some of you served in combat, some served in ways that aren't recognized. All of you served, and service doesn't end with a discharge paper. It continues every day in how we treat each other, how we lift up the broken, how we refuse to let suffering become acceptable. The crowd was silent, not the silence of boredom, but the silence of people holding space for words that mattered. The Ashford Foundation trains veterans to become advocates, teachers, counselors. We take the skills you learned in uniform, discipline, loyalty, mission focus, and redirect them toward healing. Because healing is also a mission, and it never ends. He looked at his father, who was crying openly now. Garrett had done that a lot in recent months. 15 years of held tears finally permitted to fall. A tattoo on my neck used to mean I was connected to someone I'd lost. Now it means I'm connected to everyone he saved, everyone they'll save. An ever-expanding circle of mercy that started with one man who refused to let cruelty win. Thayer touched the dog tag again. My father once wrote in his journal that every person matters. That's true, but the reverse is also true. Every person matters to someone. Someone's son, someone's father, someone's reason to keep fighting. He looked directly at the camera broadcasting this live. 14 million people were watching. The number would grow. If you're watching this and you're struggling, if you're alone, if you feel like no one sees you or cares that you exist, you're wrong. You matter. Your pain matters. Your survival matters. And there are people like my father, like everyone here, who will stand with you when you can't stand alone. He stepped back from the podium. The crowd rose, not just polite applause, but a standing ovation that rolled like thunder. 200 people honoring one man's legacy and the son trying to carry it forward. Garrett approached, leaned on a cane he'd need for the rest of his life. They embraced, 2 men who'd both been broken and both survived by holding on to each other across 15 years of separation. Proud of you, Garrett whispered. Learn from the best, Thayer replied. Behind them, the memorial stones stood silent witness, names carved in granite, numbers reduced to names. People remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived. As the ceremony concluded, as people began to disperse into afternoon light, Thayer stood with his father and looked out over Arlington's careful rows of white markers, each one a person, each one a story, each one connected to others in ways that defied simple math. His phone buzzed, a text from Merritt. 200 new volunteers just signed up for training. We're going to need a bigger facility. Thayer smiled, showed his father the message. Good problem to have, Garrett said. They walked slowly toward the parking area. Father and son, both limping from different wars, both carrying scars that would never fully fade, but walking together, finally together. Hey, Dad? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up, for staying alive, for teaching me that mercy is power. Garrett stopped, looked at his son with eyes that had seen hell and chosen heaven anyway. Thayer, I survived 15 years in that place by thinking about you every single day. You saved me long before you crawled through that ventilation shaft. You saved me by being the kind of son who makes a father want to survive, who makes fighting worth it. They held each other as people streamed past. Two men who'd both been lost and both been found. Two men building something from rubble and hope and the stubborn insistence that mercy could win. Above them, clouds moved across winter sky. Below them, grass grew green over the graves of heroes. Around them, life continued its complicated dance of joy and pain and everything between. And for the first time in 15 years, Thayer Ashford felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The Ashford Foundation continues its work, having helped over 4,000 veterans transition from military service to civilian advocacy roles. Dr. Garrett Ashford teaches medical ethics at Columbia University, where his course on compassion under extreme conditions is consistently oversubscribed. He walks with a cane, but stands without assistance when lecturing about the 127 victims of Project Chimera, ensuring their names are never forgotten. Governor Juliette Whitmore served 2 terms before retiring to write a memoir titled Saved by a Number. She remains on the Foundation's board and speaks monthly at veteran support groups about survival, recovery, and the debt we owe those who choose mercy when violence is easier. Thayer Ashford serves as executive director of the Foundation. He still flies his C-47 on weekends, though now he knows exactly where he's going. He married a teacher he met at a Foundation event. They have 2 children, both named after people from Detention Camp 7 who didn't survive. Major Elise Merritt became Director of Veteran Operations at the Foundation, overseeing the training of 4,000 veterans. She never married, says the work is family enough. She still shoots at the range every Sunday, and every Sunday she leaves one target untouched, in memory of Doc Ashford, who hated guns but carried one anyway. Lieutenant Hayes designed the Foundation's technological infrastructure: secure communications, encrypted databases, systems that protect those who've been failed by other systems. He walks without a limp now, thanks to surgery the Foundation helped fund. Corporal Daniels runs tactical training programs, teaching veterans how to de-escalate conflicts without violence. She married a teacher and adopted 3 children. She tells them stories about a doctor who proved that strength means protection, not domination. Sergeant Lowell leads wilderness therapy retreats for veterans with PTSD in the Montana mountains. He finally learned to talk, in his own time, in his own way. His retreats have a 92% success rate. Private Quinn supervises the Foundation's construction projects, building shelters, clinics, safe spaces. He jokes that he finally gets to blow things up legally and constructively. He's been sober for 5 years. They meet monthly for dinner at a restaurant in New Columbia, where they tell stories about a doctor who taught them that survival without humanity isn't survival at all. Senator Dalton Voss died in federal prison in 2091. He never expressed remorse. At his funeral, 3 people attended, 2 lawyers and a priest. The prison chaplain said a prayer for his soul. Nobody else said anything at all. The 46 prisoners freed from Blackstone scattered across the country, rebuilding lives from fragments. Most stayed in contact. All remember. Every August 28th, they gather at Arlington to honor the man who chose them over freedom, who chose mercy over safety, who proved that one person, standing when everyone else falls, can change everything. Project Chimera's complete records were declassified in 2087. The 127 victims were formally honored by Congress with a national memorial in Washington, D.C. Their families received federal compensation and a promise that such experiments would never happen again. Time will tell if promises mean anything. The mark NB4721 has been retired from use in the federal prison system. Now it means something else. Hospitals across the country have NB wards, spaces dedicated to treating prisoners with dignity and compassion, staffed by volunteers who understand that every number is a person. On his desk at Columbia University, Dr. Garrett Ashford keeps a photograph from Arlington Cemetery. In it, his son stands at a podium, speaking to 200 people about mercy and power. Behind Thayer, visible in the background, is a white headstone. The inscription reads, "In memory of the 127 who did not survive. They were not numbers. They were people. They mattered." Every morning before class, Garrett touches that photograph. Then he says his son's name out loud, the same ritual he maintained for 15 years in hell. But now Thayer can hear him. Now they both know that mercy won. The mark on their necks no longer feels like a question. It feels like an answer.